running scandals bushed. Number 3, passport peekaboo-gate. The story behind last week's well-earned anxiety that the State Department passport files of Senators Clinton, McCain, and Obama were riffled through by some contract employees of Stanley Incorporated. Under this administration, the percentage of workers handling passports who are not State Department employees has risen from about 45% last year to about 60% this year. But as the senators can tell you, it is not affecting the security of your private data in the least. Number 2, sell out your fellow Republicans gate. Even critics of his party tend to have periodic sympathy for Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. Goes on 60 Minutes Sunday, predicts that in Iraq, quote, by the end of this year, we will have somewhere around 100,000 troops. Yesterday, the White House decided to stop withdrawing troops, meaning the number will be 130,000, same as it was before the failed surge. And thus, not only did it throw on the brakes and let poor Graham go through the windshield, but it made him then say he misspoke when he said 100,000. And number 1, Watergate-Gate. Turns out that the Vice President of the United States, in what really was one of the epic series of interviews of the generation with Martha Raddatz of ABC, not only answered so to the fact that 2/3 of us say Iraq was a terrible mistake, but he also has compared staying in Iraq to President Ford's pardon of Richard Nixon for Watergate. If Ford had paid attention at the time to the polls, he never would have done that. And I have the same strong conviction the issues we're dealing with today, the global war on terror, the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, all the tough calls the president has had to make. Well, there it is. Cheney compares Bush going into Iraq to Ford's pardoning of Nixon. Of course, Cheney went on to say that history proved Ford was correct, which is at best a hallucination on Mr. Cheney's part. He also suggested history will prove Bush correct, which sounds like those guys who still sit around arguing that the Romanovs are the rightful rulers of Russia. But you knew it had to happen. For the first time since 2001, Dick Cheney actually said something that kind of made sense. 30 years after he pardoned Nixon, Gerald Ford went to his grave, identified principally not as a successful interim president at a time of crisis, not as a distinguished leader in the House, not even as a member of the Warren Commission, but as the guy who pardoned Nixon, probably cost his party the next election, and denied the country a trial that might have rendered this whole concept of the imperial presidency extinct in this country. And in 2039, whether he's alive or dead, George Bush will be identified principally not as a successful rallying point for a nation shocked by 9/11, not as a leader in international help for Africa, but as that guy who lied the nation into war in Iraq, hampered the fight against terrorists, and never once, never for a moment saw the forest for the trees. Thus is the Ford pardon of Nixon and staying in Iraq the apt comparison. Thanks, Dick.